Hello,
Hello.
and welcome to Planet Marzipan, the Fish and Marillion podcast. I'm Mezza, and here's my mate,
Craig Houston.
Hello, and welcome to Planet Marzipan. I'm Mezza. I'm here with my good friend,
Craig.
Craig. And
Yes,
it's another one of our Planet Marzipan Meets episodes, and we are really pleased to welcome Steven Rainey to the podcast. Hi, Steven.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you guys.
No, you're more than welcome. Thanks for coming on.
And it's great having a
Steven-
professional on for once.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, professional is in the loosest sense of the term, as we'll probably discover over the course of this.
Oh, you don't get as loose as this.
Yeah.
Well, we've invited Steven on because he has a series on BBC Radio Ulster called Long Player, and it's based on albums. And there was an episode toward the end of July, all about Marillion's Brave album, which piqued our interest, as you might imagine, Steve. It's a great episode, really, really recommended. But we wanted to get Steven on to talk about, the fact that he's got, is it 4, 5 Marillion songs, H-era Marillion songs in that hour?
I think so. Most of the album features in some capacity across the hour, either just as a linking track or the full track. And as a producer of these kind of programs, Marillion presented an unusual challenge in that regard, particularly with this album, in that the tracks are so long sometimes that as a fan, I don't want to leave anything out. So I face all these kind of production decisions that I don't face with other records. Like, do I use the single edit of Alone Again in the Lap of Luxury? Am I making a terrible mistake by leaving that guitar solo out? And these are the kind of things that keep me awake at night when making a program like this.
It's that attention to detail, isn't it? Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, Stephen? Are you freelance? Do you work for the BBC?
I've worked for the BBC. It'll be coming up to 20 years in May of next year, of 2026. I started as a trainee. Before that, I'd worked in a record shop in Scotland. I'm originally from Northern Ireland, but I'd lived in Scotland, up in Aberdeen, for a long time, and kind of came back to Northern Ireland, not really intending to stay here that long. I find myself doing a trainee course with the BBC. And I think by virtue of the fact that I lived around the corner from Broadcasting House in Belfast at the time, I was always on hand to fill in whenever anyone was sick. So I've managed to make an accidental career out of it. And I've kind of worked across everything on Radio Ulster, as well as doing some work in network radio with like Radio 1 and doing things for Radio 4. I think I did something for Six Music as a contributor before as well. And it's the kind of thing I still sort of pinch myself going, this is somehow my career. It became a career after about 15 years, where I realized, oh, this is your job, actually. So it's that kind of thing. When you combine something you love with something you work as, is it truly ever work? And as my wife is often keen to remind me, yes, it is work, and you should treat it like that sometimes.
It's good to be in something that you love, though. That's the dream job, isn't it? Something
Absolutely.
that feels like a hobby and it doesn't really feel like work.
It's that kind of thing. I always say to people that if you're interested in radio, then when it's going well, there's no other job like it. And I've presented a variety of programs. The series I was doing before this current series was much more current affairs based. And
Was it a Sunday?
Yeah, a Sunday morning program. And I'd find myself like it was kind of themed around the Sunday papers. So one minute I'd be talking to like an astronomer about space debris. The next minute I'd be speaking to someone from the COVID inquiry. The next minute I'd be talking about, I don't know, the migratory habits of swallows or something. And the breadth of things you were exposed to was fascinating. And I always kind of felt really blessed to be able to be in a position where I could have these conversations, because I suppose I've got a naturally quite inquisitive mind. So, but my true love has always been music, really. And to kind of move into a program like this, which is very much my kind of thing, has been a challenge in how one puts it together, but also a joy to do, because this is what I've been thinking about for 40 years anyway, you know.
Who devised the concept of the show, Stephen?
It was kind of, it was, I must give the credit to one of my bosses, who called me in one day and said, right, we're moving things around in the schedule, and I have got an idea that has your name written all over it. And it kind of, I think, after years of working with him, he'd just gone, well, this is the kind of thing he talks about all day. Why not? Why not put a microphone in front of him and see what happens? So, I mean, I'd presented music programs before, but I'd also been a music journalist in the past as well. And my interests tend towards the kind of classic album format, really, to be honest with you. When it comes to my own consumption of music, I'm an albums guy, and I'm not interested in shuffle and picking this, that, or here. I want to sit down with a record and really listen to it and absorb myself in that and listen to it the way it was intended, which is quite ironic, as anyone who's heard the Marillion program will realize that the tracks are played completely out of sequence in a way the band would never have desired. But the idea is to make you want to listen to it the way they intended it. But yeah, it's that kind of thing of getting into the context of how albums were made. I mean, for me, my kind of enjoyment of music really comes from beyond the music itself, looking at how things existed at the time they were made and how we can look at them now, devoid of some of that context that can seem quite off-putting at the time. And Brave is a perfect example of that. The kind of central thesis, as it were, for what I was working with was that this is such a perfect album, an undeniably perfect album, but at the time it was released, it could not have been more out of favor with what the kind of music buying public and the zeitgeist in the UK was after. And you take that context of Britpop and post-grunge away, what you're left with is a remarkable record that grows in stature every year.
Absolutely, absolutely. And within the show itself, as well as sort of talking about the political landscape at the time, you also talk about other bands that may have been influenced or may have influenced the album in turn, don't you?
Absolutely, because I think it's always fascinating to kind of chart that journey when you look at like any whatever the album it might be, taking a look at what were these artists listening to when they were making this, but also who else was listening to them when they were making it, and then kind of taking the other side of things. A record, say like Brave, it has been hugely influential, and there's any number of sort of contemporary bands that can absolutely draw a line back to what Marillion were doing in '94 and beyond. And I think it's always, to me, it's always useful to kind of do that compare and contrast thing. And I was listening back to the program in the car with my wife. She's always my sounding board of going, is this an interesting story or am I just being indulgent? And one of the things that really struck us was listening to some of the Fish era Marillion songs compared to the early Steve Hogarth era songs, and thinking, what, pun intended, what a brave decision it was to go with him, considering how different he was vocally, presence wise, thematically, to what they'd had before. So I guess for me, using other artists and using the stuff that's all part of that melting pot, it can really give you an insight into how a band works sometimes.
And do you want to name check a couple of the other, because there are other bands featured in this same episode?
Yeah, in the Marillion episode, I mean, as I say, I had to root that in the era in which it emerged. And '94 was the big year for Britpop. So you had your Blur and Oasis dominating the charts, both releasing, very strong albums that have stood the test of time as well. But the band for me of that era that really have that overlap with Marillion was Suede. And I don't even think that's necessarily a comparison that they would even see, perhaps.
Yeah.
But I feel that their second album, Dogman Star, it's a dark, brooding, contemplative album. It's definitely a bit more on the glam rock side than Marillion ever were, but it's quite claustrophobic, and it's got that sense of kind of alienation that I think runs through Brave, that sense of being displaced from the time, of being out on a limb somewhere and not quite knowing, feeling your way through the darkness, as it were. So for me, very much, if you listen to Dogman Star by Suede and then Brave back to back, they don't strictly, they're not influence each other necessarily, but they're occupying a similar headspace. I think they take you on a similar kind of journey. And then, of course, I think for mid 90s and late 90s Marillion, it's kind of hard to escape Radiohead. That they are definitely, again, to me, occupying similar thematic territory, sonic territory. Radiohead were kind of coquettish a little bit in how they embraced progressive rock sounds. They did do it, but they kind of skirted around it a little bit. But I think you listen to a record like OK Computer, and I think they're doing similar things to what Marillion were doing at the same time. And I do think that there's a little bit of kind of overlap between the two bands. I think I can hear Radiohead influencing Marillion, and I do genuinely think that Radiohead will have heard Marillion at some point of those records and gone, here, there is definitely something in there that chimes with us too. So I played Lucky from OK Computer, which again, it's that use of the mellotron coming in halfway through it, the brooding kind of darkness to it, and even those kind of chord shapes that they were using. I think that Radiohead at the time they were not afraid to avoid the obvious melodic route in the same way that Marillion could kind of take some really fractured melodies and chords and turn it into something beautiful.
Yeah, I may be dreaming this, but I'm sure I've seen a very old photo of Radiohead in a bedroom with a Marillion poster on the wall.
Yes, there is.
That would make complete sense to me.
But also, yeah, I mean, they said there was a story as well as when Radiohead, when bands AMI headquarters, to have a chance of like snaffling CDs, and they did reportedly take a copy of Brave and a few other albums when they as part of their freebies. So
it makes sense to me. And again, it's that kind of thing. Part of the joy of this program is looking at the vogues and the fashions and the trends at the time, and then swiping that all away and looking at what you're left with. And Marillion were, there's no doubt about it, they were out of style for a large part of the record buying public at the time, certainly with the music press. But I absolutely fundamentally believe that, as the band themselves were quite keen to suggest in the late 90s, early 2000s, that if you take those preconceptions and put them away and just listen to what's actually on the disc, you're going to hear something that chimes with all these other sounds that are being made at the time. And I do think if the planets had aligned slightly differently, people, when I say people, I really mean the hip tastemaker critics, would say Marillion's name in the same breath as like Radiohead. I did have a bit in the program originally, which I cut out, about kind of thinking, if in a different world Marillion had changed their name in '89, would that have made the difference? Because I think even to this day, for some part of the audience, the name has certain connotations, and people go into it expecting one thing and get something quite different and aren't able to kind of put the two together. In the end, I let it go because I thought that's an entirely different avenue.
It's a different story, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
An episode in itself there, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, it's funny to look at when, I remember buying Brave on the day it came out. But also, that wasn't the only CD that I bought on the day that Brave came out, because bizarrely, the album that came out on the same day that got a #1 at that time was Enigma's album Return to Innocence. And that couldn't be anything further from what this is.
I think as well, because that's the thing. I mean, but Britpop was all the rage, sure, but you look back at the charts of that year, because the one thing I'm addicted to, especially, there's another program I work on where I write lists of records that didn't quite get to the top of the charts, the number twos, and finding out what kept them off the top of the charts and whatnot. And going through the charts of that era, the British record buying public were crazy. I don't know what they were drinking at that point, because the stuff that's in the charts at that era is insane. The mixture of things. So the idea that, it's the height of Britpop and here's Gregorian chanting with dance beats over the top of it, that makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the number two, but Kayleigh, the Marillion's big hit, that was a perpetual #2 because it was originally kept off #1 by Paul Hardcastle's #19. Then that dropped, and then they should have gone up to #1, but they didn't, because then a charity single came into #1, and they still kept #2, so they were slightly robbed. But it's what happens,
I think radio was more powerful in those days, though, wasn't it?
Yeah,
because you didn't have all the
was fragmented
and all these other influences, so they could, in a way, dictate more what the fashions were and direct people to that.
I mean, again, having worked in radio for a long time, there is like it's not an affliction is almost the word I want to use. It's that need to find the new thing, to find whatever the new thing is before it's the new thing. It's an addiction for a lot of people, and I say I've worked in parts of radio where it is the new music programs where we are out there actively looking for stuff, and in that kind of desire to find the new thing, sometimes there are casualties to that where other stuff falls by the wayside, or also things that were new and didn't quite find their niche get swept away and we move on immediately. And I think in the era of that sort of the early sort of H era where you're going from 89 onwards, there's a big shift happening in music in the UK and people are searching for new things, and you get that support from Marillion at the start. There is radio play, but then as the other things that are perceived to be more exciting, grunge and Britpop and even sort of early hip hop things coming through as well, there's just this desire we must move forward. Interestingly, though, in my research for the program, one of the joys of doing a program like this is that I have access to the BBC archives. I've got a wonderful colleague in our BBC library where every week I go, Peter, you're not gonna enjoy this one, but I'm having to find information on blah blah blah. And it's always something really specific, like, do you have information on, I don't know, Michael Stipe in 1992 talking about mandolins or something? And lo and behold, we inevitably have something, and we unearthed some interviews with Steve Hogarth from the BBC archive. And one of the things that struck me is that even back then in 1990, 91, 92, 93, the fervor with which the fan base had connected to him is in full evidence. And there's a story again, which I had to leave out for reasons of space, of Bob Harris when he was presenting on Radio 1 saying that every time he played Marillion on the programme, the switchboards would get jammed with Marillion fans phoning the station to thank him for playing it. And again, even at that stage, it just shows what a loyal, hardcore fan base they had, that the seeds for what would happen later are sown even at the beginning of that story, and in the interviews, Steve Hogarth is bowled over by. I think he's still so young and so new in the role. He doesn't quite know what to make of it yet. So it's fascinating to hear it at that period.
Yeah. How did you first hear about Marillion?
I was my first exposure to prog in general, I suppose, was Pink Floyd. I was a teenage Pink Floyd fan, as I think every teenager in Britain must be at some point. And as things went on, I got exposed to. But sorry, I was thinking about this afternoon. There was a broadcast on Channel 4 in about the year 2000, called The Top 10 of Prog, and it was a rundown of the biggest selling progressive rock acts. It was presented by Bill Bailey. It's etched in my brain. And it was one of those things, it was just mind-blowing to see Genesis, Hawkwind, King Crimson, Yes, and whatever else. And I'd been aware of Marillion, obviously, with the hits in the 80s and things, and I'd heard songs in the background. But it wasn't until I was working in the record shop in Scotland, and I think it was when Marbles came out, that I saw the cover, and I was going through the new releases, putting things out, and saw the cover and went, all right, that's Marillion. Their records they haven't looked like that for a while. And I obviously was thinking back to the iconic covers of the Fish albums and Mark Wilkinson's artwork and whatnot. Put the record to one side, had a listen to it, and was kind of really intrigued by the sound. But then, as again, part of that new thing, I'm working in a record shop, there's so many new things coming out, you get distracted. And it wasn't until, and this is my shout out moment, it's a colleague in the BBC, Chris, if you're listening, I'm talking about you, who just, he heard me doing a phone interview with Roger Dean, who designed the famous iconic album covers for Yes. And he was like, you love your prog, don't you? And I was like, well, I really do. He said, have you listened to Marillion? And I thought to myself, not for a long time. And he wore me down. And within a couple of days, I was just completely immersed in the band, and really kind of diving headfirst into the Marillion Mark II, the new boy, as it were. And from that point on, they've just been a constant fixture in my life. It's one of those things where no matter what's been happening over the past 15 years or whatever it is, they're a band I've always gone back to. They've always been the kind of backdrop, and I very much took them to my heart. And it is that kind of thing that the teenage me in 1996, 97, 98 would have loved the records they were making at that point, but I just wasn't hearing them. And I think, again, that's why making a program like this, yes, it's too little too late, of course, but there's the hope that there's a kid out there who stumbles across this program and goes, oh, I like the sound of that. I'm going to give it a go.
Well, that's the way it seems to be pitched to me. There is a brief potted history of the band. You talk about the Fish era, you talk about the changing vocalist, and then the bulk of the program is talking about this fantastic record and its legacy as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I kind of want to. I mean, the series is, in a way, the way I kind of think of it is sometimes it's not really about the music; it's about the story, and the idea that Marillion not only survived the departure of a key member and then experienced all kinds of trials and tribulations, but went on to thrive and then quietly usher in this revolution in the music industry. That's a remarkable story, and when the history books are written, I think they absolutely deserve their place in the tale. And if I can help people hear that story again, I mean, I want people to walk away. The ideal situation for me is someone listens to the program and goes, right, hits stop, gets the record out, puts it on, and sits back and enjoys it, and either goes, that guy was talking nonsense, or I agree with some of what he says, or whatever. But I want to get the debate going. If
Absolutely.
nothing else, I want people to react to the stories and go, okay, I might not dig the band particularly, but what a great story. I mean, in my mind, I remember watching I'm sure you guys have maybe come across it, the Rush documentary Beyond the Lighted Stage,
Yes.
that was made a good few years ago now. And it's a massive Rush fan anyway, but like it's a program that I would bring to people and go, watch this, and even if you walk away from this going, I do not want to hear their music ever again, you will fall in love with these guys.
It's the
And
humor that you never really saw the
yeah,
humor of Rush until much later in the career, did you? The fact that they
and
all goofed around.
that's it. I think with Marillion, with the association with prog rock and whatnot, and the connotations that for a lot of people that conjures up, they never really got to see the sense of humor that was often on display, the kind of surrealism that's often on display, the wit that's often on display. And as I say, if I can make you come away from it going, well, that's a good story, and they seem like decent guys, well, job done. But if I get you to listen to the album, well, that's a star for me that day.
Totally understand that. We have a sister podcast that we call Planet Music, where we review an album, and there's four of us that do the podcast, and we each sort of chip in ideas for what the next episode might be. And there's nothing better than when you suggest an album and the other guys really get off on that. And we reviewed an album called Toy Matinee recently. I don't know if you're aware of that album.
No, I'm not familiar with that one.
Guy Pratt, Kevin Gilbert, Patrick
Oh, right,
Bennett.
okay, okay. I know.
Um,
I mean, I'm familiar with
yeah,
the people making it, but I haven't heard the album yet.
the guys had never heard it and they were bowled over by it, and I felt so like a proud father.
But I get that, though. I do get that because the peril of sharing your favorite music with other people is that two things can happen. One, you get someone looking at you blankly going, I do not get what you're saying, and I do not want what you're selling. And the other side of it is someone going, the eyes lighting up and going, oh, this is for me, and that's the kind of dynamic, as you're well familiar with, that when you bring a record to other people, you're taking a risk, because music is such a personal thing. It soundtracks our lives. It's every time we have a memory of something that's important to us, there's a song, there's a band, there's an album that's in the backdrop to that. And when you bring that record to someone else that has, been the most important moment in your life, and they go, nah, I don't like it, that can be heartbreaking.
Absolutely.
So,
I'm sure that
it's
day is
a
coming
gamble.
very soon. Yeah.
Oh, I've experienced this more than once. I've experienced. In fact, I recently was at a music festival in Northern Ireland, Radio Ulster was at the Stendhal Festival outside a town called Limavady, and all kinds of local bands and a few kind of bigger bands like the Lightning Seeds and Mr. Scruff and things like this were taking part. And I was chatting to a person at our Radio Ulster tent, and someone had told them what the program that I present was. And the next episode was going to be Metallica, the Black Album. And he said, "Oh, I love Metallica. I can't wait to hear it. What's the current one?" I was like, "Well, it's Neil Young and Rust Never Sleeps." He went, "No, hate him, not listen to that." I was like, "Well, okay, I'm not going to change your mind on that one then, but at least give it a go, you know." And but that's the way it is. That's why music's so important to us. It's so
Yeah.
subjective.
Well, I mean, it's an incredible list of the episodes that are out already. So Brave is in some heady company. Black Sabbath's Paranoid, Neil Young and Crazy Horse, as you've just said, the Metallica Black Album, Blondie's Parallel Lines.
It's such a tightrope picking the records, and it's myself and another colleague, my executive producer Rory, and we would go through. But you know, on the one hand, you've got your radio production hat on. You look at what's happening in the world. So, for example, a record that we covered was, well, Neil Young, for example, because he was playing at Glastonbury. Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill is another one of the albums that we featured, and Alanis Morissette was doing a massive concert in Northern Ireland at the time. So things like that make sense, that you can kind of bring an audience to the program that will hopefully enjoy it. But at the bottom line, it has to be music that, I mean, I want to say good music, but that could mean anything, and that means different
Subjective,
things.
yeah.
It's different to every person around this table, although I'm sure we can all agree we like Marillion, but beyond that, who knows? But with the choices, I wanted to be records that have a great story to tell. And again, for me personally, records that I have a connection with, that I can bring something to. And then also there's the opportunity that some of these records are hugely well known. You know, some of these records, like say the Black Album by Metallica, it needs no introduction, but at the same time there's a story behind the scenes there that might be interesting. Conversely, Brave is a record that does, I feel, need an introduction, and I'm in a position where I can make that introduction, and I know that the music is strong enough and the story is strong enough that for all the people who listen to it, there will be a huge portion of that who may have never heard this before, who can walk away from it going, "This is something new, this is something fresh for me to get involved with." So again, I mean, I'm very lucky in the sense that I have a very broad taste in music. I mean, working in radio and working in a record shop does that to you.
Yeah.
I've been exposed to all kinds of things, and don't get me wrong, there are certainly things I don't like as well. But with the series, I hope to be able to bring a bit of my own kind of curation into it, really, where I'm able to go, this is a record that I think deserves a bit more exposure than it has. But again, it comes down to that story, and I think that Marillion have one of the great stories. They are the great survivors more than any other band. I think if nuclear war were to break out tomorrow, Marillion would still be able to go to Portland and put on a good show for us. You know, they will survive.
Yeah, it's funny because I mean we were fans back in the day. I mean, John's been a fan since the very
82,
early
yeah.
days of '82. I mean, my fandom really started when Steve Hogarth joined and Fish left. So Seasons End and Vigil were the two albums that really got me into the band, and then went backwards. But Brave, when that came out in '94, was a really special time because when we bought the album first, historically, Holidays was beforehand, was quite a lot popular. There was no single before the album came out, so yeah, you went into it absolutely cold, and a lot of the fans and not the hardcore fans were like, "What the heck is this?" and we were like that a little bit. I mean, it only took me about a week or two to get into it. But when the album came out, it was the start of February. The tour started because the tour had been booked in because the album was delayed because it was supposed to be out like the back end of '93, but was pushed back to the start of '94. But the tour was already tour was already booked for it. So you only had the album for, it was only a matter of like 2 weeks or so.
No, it was about
before,
4, I think, but yeah.
It was out the 7th, and we was the 24th. Yeah. So it wasn't long before we actually saw it in Leeds Town and Country Club for the first time. I was absolutely blown away by it.
See, again, it's fascinating to me because for you guys who were fans at the time, and as I say, I was a bit too young to catch it at that point. I would have been, when Brave came out, I think I'd have been 14, and it was just I was finding my feet musically. And I want to know though that did it click immediately? Because
No.
one of the things for me, the first time I heard Brave, that was with the baggage of knowing that it was regarded by the fans as a masterpiece. But it still took me a little bit of time to click with it. And I'll hold my hands up and say, I preferred Holidays in Eden for a long time. There was something about that record that really clicked with me. And, looking at the timeline, I know that Brave could not have been further away from what was on Holidays in Eden. So when I listened to Brave, initially I thought, this is a bit too quiet, it's a bit too hushed, it's a bit too understated. But obviously, as time went on, it worked its magic on me. But for you guys, when that came out, I'm really curious as to, was there that immediate sort of, oh, what is this?
I was absolutely gutted the first time I played it. I couldn't hear the melodies. As you say, it was also so downplayed. I thought my favorite band had lost it. I really did. The very first play, but it is now and will always be. I think I can't see this changing. It is now my favorite Marillion album, and always will be.
Yeah.
But at the time, seeing it live really made it click. All the stuff with Hogarth with the pigtails and the makeup and all of that. That really, really brought it home. But it's as you've said in your episode, it's an incredible record now. But
Yeah.
no, at the time, I think the early days, it was a fairly mixed reaction.
Yeah, I mean, on my first hearing, it was like John said, we kind of thought that they forgot to put the songs on, because it was more of a stream of conscious. Everything was intertwined together. But from the first playing of it, I loved The Great Escape, so that got me into it and made again afterwards. But the Great Escape, and still now is my favorite Marillion song.
Because I actually listened to the Made Again album, the live album, a couple of weeks ago, and it's funny because when I first heard Brave, as I say, I was underwhelmed by it. I just didn't quite know what they were doing, and hearing it as a live album actually helped kind of, oh right, okay, I can see where this fits together a bit more now. And again, this isn't necessarily an opinion that all Marillion fans agree with, but the Steven Wilson remix I've loved as well. I like the original mix, and I like having the Wilson remix, because I think that the Steven Wilson remix is a bit more robust. I suppose that the rock band element of the band is a bit more to the fore on that one, whereas the original Dave Megan mix, I hear more of the atmospherics in it. So again, they're a band and there's not many bands you can say this about, that you can sit and wallow in all the different versions of the songs and still find something engaging about it.
But when we went from Brave to Afraid of Sunlight, there wasn't a long time in between those albums. You're only talking about it from February 94, and Afraid of Sunlight came out like June of 95. So there was really short time period. But when Afraid of Sunlight came out, it had such a different feel to it, yet it was a lot lighter album, yet it was more, you could almost imagine it being a cross between Holidays in Eden and Brave, but progression onwards, where it's got more like of a commercial vibe to it.
Absolutely. I think that Afraid of Sunlight is very much the album the EMI were expecting in 94 and didn't get. But then when they did get that record, the damage had been done from their perspective, that they didn't promote it, they didn't push it. Because again, Afraid of Sunlight is such an accessible record with such brilliant songs on it. The idea of that fitting in the musical landscape of 1995 isn't that hard to imagine, but it just didn't get the push. So it's another what if, isn't it? What if they'd done the albums the other way around? Would we be talking about it?
It was in Q Magazine's best albums of the year, wasn't it? So they managed to sort of win some of the media over. But yeah,
with Brave itself, I mean, with the Brave tour, going on stage, I mean, in the UK, they came on stage and played it from beginning to end. 70 odd minutes was the first part of the gig, and you either got it or you didn't.
Yeah,
And it was a very brave move. And
absolutely.
there's a
It
lot
was a
of
very
people.
it was a very prog move, though, wasn't it? It was a very
Yes.
Lamb Lies Down on Broadway type.
It's the
you
done
know,
thing, isn't
this
it?
is
You have
it.
no safety net. Just dive in. You either get it or you don't get it. This is what we're doing.
Yeah, it's basically just they're kind of like the wall, really, isn't it? That kind of performance piece, and it was absolutely
I think that
amazing.
the confidence of the band at that point to make that album and then to do that where they performed it live to an audience of people who weren't familiar with it at all. I think they knew what they had on their hands, even if the rest of the world didn't. And the fact that they've come back to it time and time again is significant. Because again, doing the research for the record and listening to interviews and things, um, I know that Steve Hogarth has said in retrospect that it wasn't understood at the time. It wasn't an overnight
Yeah, there's a lot
success
of
by
that.
any
Yeah.
stretch of it. So that, but even from that perspective of putting the album out there and it not being necessarily understood by their fans to playing it live in its entirety immediately, I think they knew these were great songs and that it would grow with the audience. And I think for me, that's something I've put into the program, that having heard that album a lot over the last 15 years, 15, 20 years or whatever it is now, I have grown with it. Certain aspects of the record have been more appealing at certain points of my life. And even the idea of becoming a father, which I did a few years ago, and then listening to the record in that context again changes things for me. And I keep saying there's not many bands and there's not many records I can say that about where this grows with you. And I think it's a testament to the band and to their fans that Brave feels like an evolving thing. It means something different in 2025 to what it did in 1994, and it'll mean something different next year and the year after that as well.
And it's a proper vinyl record. It's a record that, if you've got the time and you want a proper session, play the four sides of vinyl. You never know what ending you're gonna get.
True, Bill. Actually, I'm a CD guy. That is, I've always been CDs, and I have a record player in the house, but I have no amp at the minute. So, but I'm pleased to say there's a CD player in nearly every room at the moment. So if I ever happen to need to stick Brave on, there's multiple copies in this house. It's sitting about everywhere. Just fire it on and away you go. If there's an emergency, we're catered for.
What else is coming up in the series? So you said Alanis Morissette, is that in this same series?
Alanis Morissette we've done that one a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember when that was. It would have been in June, but we've been kind of planning forward ahead at the moment. So I'm currently writing a piece about the Smiths, about their second album, the second studio album, Meat is Murder. We've also got records from Bjork coming up. My goodness. We're still finalizing the list at the minute, but I like to keep it as up online on the listings on the BBC homepage, things as much as possible to give people an idea of what's coming up. We've been kind of put back a week because of obviously the sad news of Ozzy Osbourne's passing, and we were lucky that we were able to make the program available again that I made about Black Sabbath, because BBC programs tend to only live online for about 4 or 5 weeks at most.
Right.
So we were able to make it available again and let people hear it. And there is a slight sense of frustration with the Marillion program that I have been contacted by a multitude of fans that the BBC has introduced a geo-blocking policy with the Sounds platform at the moment, and there's a lot of fans outside of the UK that aren't able to hear the programme, and I am desperately trying to find some workaround solution for that. So
VPN.
No,
VPN.
I said nothing.
We don't think it's all like that, no. No.
It's that kind of thing. I understand some of the reasons behind this. It's a little unclear as well. I'm not really in a position to comment upon it as a policy, but it is one of those things that I think that hopefully at some point there will be some kind of resolution, and it's a program I want people who are outside of the UK to hear. And I know that there's a lot of fans who are quite disappointed that they couldn't hear it. So this is my moment of apology that I hadn't realised that it came in that week, and if only I'd got it out the week before it came in, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So again, I apologize for that, and I know it's frustrating, especially because as we mentioned earlier, Marillion don't always get a lot of coverage in sort of mainstream media or whatever you want to look at it, and getting the chance to rectify that and then people not being able to hear it is doubly frustrating. So sorry about that.
we've had
Yeah,
some
but at least-
comment. We shared the news of the episode straight away, and we've had lots of comments of a similar ilk from our European listers. So
Yes.
if we
I
manage to find a way around it, we will update people.
absolutely. If I can find a solution, I will let you guys know, and you can spread the word.
A legal one.
Yes, exactly. I'm innocent, Gov. I did nothing.
But I mean, at least BBC sounds it'll be hanging around for a while on there because
Absolutely. And the plan with the series is, as I say, most BBC programs for copyright reasons stay online for 4 weeks. It's always because the music contained in the programs obviously doesn't belong to us, so we can't keep them on long in perpetuity. However, we are looking at ways in which we can keep the programs on for longer and give the episodes a lifespan. So even if once 4 weeks go by, the program falls off the Sounds platform, the plan is that it will come back there again, so people will have the chance to come back to it again. Because as I say, I mean, you guys mentioned it's a labor of love. They all are in their own ways. This one particularly for me because it's a record that meant an awful lot to me, and I wanted people to hear it. I've had a few people get in touch saying that they'd never heard the band before, and that is the real kind of moment of why we do these things. You know, the BBC is a public service broadcaster, and I think first, I'm not sure it's in our charter, but exposing people to Marillion is a public service. So if I can help with that, I'll do it, you know?
We heartily agree with that.
So have you actually had a chance to see the band live yourself, or?
I have, yes. I've only seen them once. I saw them in Belfast at the Ulster Hall when they were touring just off the back of Fear. Now, I've been reliably informed that the concert the next night in Dublin was better, but the performance I saw was spectacular. And I have to say that if you were to ask what is your favorite Marillion album, it would be for me Fear. I think I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it was. And it's one of those records that the moment I heard it, I just knew this is a masterpiece. And again, I know not everyone thinks that about Fear necessarily, but for me personally, I just thought this is such an incredibly strong album, an album of the times we're living through, and an album for the ages. So seeing them perform that live, and I have this wonderful memory of when they were doing the gold, and the golden lights came down in the hall, and just that it was one of, I'm even getting kind of slightly goose pimply just thinking about it because it was wonderful. As I say, I've got a very good friend in the BBC here in Northern Ireland, Chris, who got me into the band, and he goes to all of the conventions and always has done, and he has pestered me to go time and time again, but I haven't been able to. But the day will come. Surely the day will come at some point.
You should. It's like nothing else. The
Oh,
convention is amazing.
I get to live through it a blow by blow account from him whilst he's enjoying it.
But one thing is really good if on the Fear album live is the performance at the Royal Albert Hall. That is an absolute corker. And the Blu-ray of that is stunning. And you know, Tim, who shot that, is a good friend of ours, and he's absolutely great.
I just love that record. I mean, particularly the kind of keyboard arpeggios at the start of the levers just really. As soon as I heard that, I was like, "There's no going back." And I have to say, it's one of those records. I think I'm kind of waiting for them to top it because I don't, in my humble opinion, that has been a career high, and I want them to kind of see if they can top it. And I don't think they have quite yet. But again, as I think we've proved with Berlin, never write them off. You know, the future is a foreign country. You know, who knows what they got. But yeah, if I had to pick one, it's Brave and Fear will have a fight out in the back garden. I don't know who's going to win, but it'll be one of the two of them.
Knockdown, drag out.
Oh yes, 2 men enter, 1 man leave.
Did you follow Fish at all on his solo career, or has that been a bit more?
I've heard quite a few of the albums. I've had the pleasure of interviewing both Fish and Steve Hogarth over the years. I've interviewed both of them, and obviously they went in such different kind of paths. And I thought Fish's last album, Weltschmerz, was actually really, really strong, and again really heartfelt. And I know that from a career perspective, that things haven't gone the way that he was expecting it to, and that it's been, my goodness, a career of up and down. There's no doubt about that. But again, I think a lot of his solo albums are so worth rediscovery. They're ripe for rediscovery in the sense that a lot of them, especially that kind of mid to late 90s albums like Fellini Days and Sunsets on Empire, I'm thinking of actually. They really, really flew under the radar, and there's a lot of great stuff on them that is ripe for rediscovery. So what I love about the band is that there are days when I'm in a Fish mood and I just want Fish. and I just want, and the record I'm always drawn to is Fugazi, and I don't necessarily even think that's their strongest record of that era, but it's the one I always come back to for whatever reason. And then there are days when I just want Marillion Mark II, and I don't want to listen to the Fish albums at all. And I kind of think, again, when one looks at bands who have that kind of career shift where a key member leaves and they sort of change, a lot of those bands, it's very easy. There's a transition and it just kind of trucks along. So when Sid Barrett leaves Pink Floyd, they become this. And when Roger Waters leaves Pink Floyd, they become this. And that's all right. Those eras coexist quite comfortably with Marillion. There are two eras and ne'er the twine shall meet. And for me, it's either one or the other. I'm in the mood wholeheartedly for one or wholeheartedly for the other.
Well, it's always been the Steve Rothery band for me, but
Well, this is it. I mean, he's the linking factor, isn't he? And I again just kind of hearing and feeling that guitar evolve throughout the ages to the kind of maestro that he is now. It's a remarkable kind of achievement, and in terms of the great guitarist, again, I don't think he gets the recognition as like as a great guitarist. That he's obviously technically gifted and everyone knows that, but I don't think he gets the recognition for just how inventive he is. And I think in terms of kind of emotive playing, there are few do it better than Steve Hogarth. In fact, making the program, when I was listening back to it, there's a particular, just one little phrase towards the end of The Hollow Man where it's like a little lick, and it sounds like it's through a Leslie speaker or whatever, and there's just this one little line comes through, and it's one of the most soulful pieces of music I have ever heard, and it's all in the details. I think he's not particularly flashy. It's all in the details. So no, it's I think it's the Steve Rothery band. Let's call it that.
Well, yeah. I mean, he's starting to. I think because he's hanging around with Hackett a lot now.
Yeah.
He always mentions Andy Latimer when he's interviewed, and obviously Dave Gilmour as a big influence. So I think, people who know really know.
Well, that's it. I don't want to say he knows, but it somehow seems appropriate, doesn't it?
And he's just put an album out with Torsten from Tangerine Dream as well. So he's still doing.
I've been reading about that the last couple of days, and I'm kind of looking forward to getting stuck into this because, as I say, I'm always kind of on the lookout for what the guys are doing. And I love the record that Steve Rothery put out. It was a good few years ago now, the Ghost of Pripyat.
Yes.
I mean, again, that's a record I would have loved to have seen got more exposure outside. I mean, again, it's the solo album of a guitar player. These records have a limited sort of, I suppose, exposure they get, but I thought it was a beautiful record. So again, it's the playing. He's a very expressive, emotive player. It's not about the theatrics. It's not about the histrionics. It's about telling stories. And the Steve Hackett's a great example of that as well. He's quite a lyrical guitar player who can do all the flashy things as well, but his guitar, his solos, his licks, his little things, they tell stories, and that's what I love about it.
Well, they've got an album together coming out soon as well.
That's manna from heaven, as far as I'm concerned.
That'll blow my mind, I'm sure. Yeah. But no, look, we can't recommend the episode, and it's a whole series highly enough. It's a great show, Stephen, and your love of the album comes out through the show. You can really tell that.
Thank you so much for saying that. As I say, it's not lost on me that I am lucky that I get to do what I do. I mean, yeah, I've put the yards in over the years working and doing things, but this is a privilege to do, and to be able to share my love of music and share in the love of music with other people. That's a buzz that doesn't go away, and particularly with this story, I guess part of the reason I'm so chuffed that I'm able to speak to you guys is that the kind of underlying theme through this whole program was the fans, that this is a record that is dearly loved by people, and that fan base in some sense made it happen. And to be able to share that with others, people who aren't part of that fan base, is a privilege as well. And if you get a couple of more people coming along for the journey, well, that's my work done for the day.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
But look, thank you very much for speaking to us this evening.
It's
pleasure.
great.
It's been a joy to meet you. You're a lovely guy, and we heartily recommend the programme. Available on BBC Sounds for folks in the UK. Outside of there, we'll
You know what to do.
get back to you. Get back to you. Yeah, Craig.
Put my pirate's eye patch on there.
Email Craig. But thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Stephen. Well, he was lovely, wasn't he?
He was absolutely lovely.
Yeah, thanks again to Stephen for coming on the podcast. If you've not heard the episode and you do have access to BBC Sounds, we do heartily recommend it. Don't we?
I would definitely do. And if you know your way around a VPN, that's all I'm going to say.
Not me saying that. Not me saying that.
Yeah, man.
All that remains to be said is it's good night from me.
And it's good night from him.
Take care.
And stay alive. Hey. Thanks for listening to Planet Marzipan Podcast. Please like and subscribe from whichever platform you get your podcasts from. You can contact us at planetmarzipanpodcast@gmail.com and check out marillion.com, fishmusic.scot for all the good stuff.